Hi there, and welcome to episode 12 of the ADHD Adult UK podcast. I'm James Brown, and disastrously, as usual, I'm joined by a man whose head is so perfectly spherical it bends light around it, fellow co-founder of ADHD Adult UK, Alex Connor. Alex, hi.
Hello, Governor.
Hello, Governor. I'm just going to ignore that from now on and just very quickly move on to the next part of any section, because is it hackles or heckles? They're rising, if you know what I mean. And I struggle immediately with wanting to reach through the screen and punching you in the face. So well done, if that was the intent. How are you anyway?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, heckles are rising, if our DMs on Twitter are any judge. I'm very well, all good, thank you. Yeah, and excited by the podcast. We have had improbably more than 3,500 downloads of this. Like utter shambles. We've also started getting
from just 10 listeners.
From just 10 listeners, yeah, your mum. We are getting emails. We've had an email, James, from Robert from Kidderminster.
Robert from Kidderminster. Yeah.
Said, why has James got a blue tick on Twitter? Was it administrative error? Thanks, Robert, for the letter. Yes, it absolutely was.
It probably was, actually.
We've got a real one. Can I read it out for you?
No, please. I don't like the fake ones, Alex. I like listening to the real ones.
They're not funny, but I'm persevering. Right. Chris has written in and said, thanks for the show, guys. Made me laugh out loud, and every word resonated with my own experience. Really appreciate what you're doing. We love these. Thank you so much. We think that's true.
Thanks, Chris.
What are our podcasts, James?
Okay, it's me next. Yeah. So I'm obviously not looking. You wouldn't believe that there is any element of scripting with these podcasts, but there's like the vaguest element, and I'm obviously not looking at that vague script. So our podcast, as I'm sure you're aware, are a tragedy in 3 parts. We choose a theme. In the last episode, we talked a little bit about what you might call diagnosis hesitancy with our special guest, Tom. In this episode, we're responding to a few requests, actually, from quite a number of people. Not the ones for us to stop doing a podcast. We're not going to respond to those requests. But the requests we're responding to are to discuss aspects of task management when you have ADHD, which is a really big problem, but it's a really important thing to be able to manage tasks. So those 3 parts, we'll start off with some evidence-based psychoeducation. We'll move on to personal reflections on what kind of task management means to us, and then we'll finish off with some top tips in that area. And of course, we'll manage to find time to fit in a game of What's James Forgotten, Mislaid, or Lost this week. So, Alex, what is task management, and why are we talking about it in respect of ADHD?
Well, my good friend James, defining and carrying out tasks and doing it without destroying your mental health is a major element of, I think, any ADHD profile. Luckily, this is something James and I know about, and we're scientists with ADHD, but we're also coaches for people with the symptoms of ADHD. And so it's something we deal with in lots of different realms. So when we're using the term task, it's a pretty broad word. We mean literally anything that is a priority for you to have to do. Could be any task at all. A reminder that the ADHD brain can make a priority in a task list. It can create long-term goals, and it really, really often wants to act on those lists to do them. We are often convinced 100% that over the next few weeks we will do them. We will, with no evidence at all, become completely different people. This is unlikely.
Unlikely is putting it mildly. Can I add something? Because normally this is where we allow you, the person that knows about these things, to talk about them. But can I add, this isn't just a conversation about project management, which the phrase task management might sound a bit like, which is what we're also calling this episode, Getting Shit Done. It's about leadership. It's about working as part of a team, although they're big parts of how we coach, and they're often major challenges for adults with ADHD. But we'll talk about those things more specifically in future episodes.
That's exactly true. This isn't the wider concepts of coaching and work and everything. It's literally about getting shit done. This is about research and evidence for tasks you need to get done over the next days and weeks. no one's a robot, no human, and everyone struggles with this. But remember that executive dysfunction that you see in most adults with ADHD, if not all, can affect both starting and finishing what appear to be relatively simple tasks. This is sometimes called failure to launch. How do I get that thing done? Cleaning my teeth, whatever. So I've got a brief summary, James, of the things that are thought to help with this. It's a list. Are you ready? So take emotional control. And that means self-author. Self-author the goals themselves that mean something to you, and self-author methods to do them that have worked in the past, or if they're new, are exciting to try. Remember, we have to look for things that float our boat. So other people's goals are pretty tricky unless the emotions of that person being happy with us are worth having. So taking emotional control of the goals by writing them yourself, or finding why you would care about them, or why you'd care about those methods. So following on from that is looking for motivation. So why would I do that? And it's short-term rewards. That's the classic thing with all of us, isn't it? What think about how you will feel, for example, at the end of the day, at the end of the hour, the end of the 5 minutes. So that's motivation control. And the third one is help. Get help. The buddy system. This is so useful, especially for me. I know it is for you. If you can work with somebody to do the task, then great. If you can't, then it can even work if you've got somebody in the room while you do it. When I cook, I ask someone to sit and work or watch telly in the room that I'm cooking in, for example.
It can also work.
Go on, James. Sorry.
Apologies. It can also work via WhatsApp or text message. If you're finding you're really struggling and you've got an ADHD buddy, if you've got somebody who either has lived experience of ADHD or understands what you're going through, sometimes just a message to say, I'm really struggling to get this thing done, and having a conversation with somebody that understands it and can help you, like you say, overcome whatever it is that's causing that failure to launch, can be helpful. I know that I message you quite often when I'm really struggling to get something done, and you just say, can you leave me alone? I'm really busy. But if I had a good ADHD buddy, then I'm sure they would give me useful advice, and that would help me get some of those tasks done.
I think that it would. That's made me laugh. Right. Yes, online's so important as well. There are other ADHD groups, loads of really good ones on social medias, and I've seen them arrange ADHD hangouts so you can join in online if you're struggling to get out, especially. I believe we're in the middle of a pandemic. So another great thing you can do is to sandwich tasks, and if there's something hard to do, put it in between something good to do. I empty the dishwasher while I really like making coffee in the morning, cafetiere coffee, and a proper coffee, James, or a little bit of ground beans. Christ. You'd love it.
If you're watching this on YouTube, you've just seen Alex do the fucking finger thing, which drives me. It drives me to the point of insanity, and he knows this. And I don't know if our good friend Snay is listening to this. He'll probably be chuckling if he is, but oh my God, you're lucky we're not in the same room.
So I hate doing the dishwasher. So when I'm making the coffee, I'm doing the fingers again. When I'm making food, I will, when there's you've got a minute or 2 minutes to wait, I'll do something then that I don't. So it's task sandwiching, and it works in lots of ways. So another one is engagement. Who's engaged in the task, or who could you ask to be engaged in the task? Being sort of accountable to someone, either the outcome of the task or just while you're doing it. Someone who's watching, engagement increases. Now, one really interesting one, I think, is just allowing yourself to be whelmed, as in don't be overwhelmed by it. And we get overwhelmed very, very easily. So small chunks or milestones. Small chunks and milestones fits with project management of every human being in existence. The short-term motivation, the accountability there for us, for adults with ADHD, is particularly problematic. It has been reported to be so tricky for ADHD adults that one small thing you can do to get started can often be the life and death difference between starting and finishing and just never engaging at all. That is advice for the normies, though, as well. Shouldn't use the word normal ever. Last one, because I'm bored, is flexibility. It's all right to give up. If it isn't working, stop. Guilt is not helpful. It's not relaxation. It's not productive. We try loads of stuff, adults with ADHD. It's one of the disorders, isn't it? But some people don't try anything, and we do. Be prepared to stop if that thing isn't working. The task has to be done. Then reflect on something that worked in the past. I know that was a really long list, James. I would suggest choosing one of them, seeing if it helps you. And for all of them, for any task, try and think back to a success you've had. Ask yourself, what happened in that success? That's what I would do as a coach, and I know you would too, James. What happened? What was I like? What was I feeling? And what success? What were the methods I used for that success? See if that works. Doesn't always, and that is okay too.
I've got to be honest, for once, that it was a long list, but for once I actually listened. I wasn't bored. You know, I didn't filter out your voice like the white noise it normally is to me.
Did you take your Listex this morning?
I did, yeah.
It might be that.
It took me a while to realise, and it's only when my mouth became so dry I could barely speak that I remembered I had taken my Listex this morning. But the people that I coach, it's odd you mentioned a dishwasher. That's come up a number of times. Breaking things down into small chunks is so helpful. Even if it's turn the computer on at first, that's a small chunk. If it's a task like sending an email or writing a document,
tiny things help.
Exactly. And then just to add, and this is so important, the being prepared to stop if it doesn't work, if you can, because obviously sometimes if something is so urgent, it may need to be done. But if you just can't do a task and you've tried a number of these different kind of evidence-based tips and it's not working, step away and don't self-chastise and don't hate yourself for it, because it's okay. You're not neurotypical. You can't just choose to do that task and then do all the tasks afterwards and have a productive day. Sometimes exactly, and just realize that sometimes it's okay to step away, go and have a walk, have something to eat or drink, clear your mind, do something that gives you reward, and then see if you can approach it again later. Right, well, that's the end of part 1. Thank you for listening. We'll be back in part 2 where we'll give some personal reflections on getting shit done. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 12 of the ADHD Adult UK podcast. We're talking about task management or getting shit done today. And in part 2, we turn to our personal reflections. So, Alex, what are your personal reflections on the topic?
Like most people with ADHD, I'm not very good at remembering I've done some stuff in my life, that I've actually managed to do tasks. I just feel like I'm a failure of someone that can't do anything. And it's like objectively not true if I write it down, but I'm not thinking along those lines. So I try to create done lists. And what I observe is I've always done things in bursts. And it's always, if I look back, based on how it's going to feel for me or for someone that I care about, once I've got that task done. Sometimes it's negative, someone that's got a horrible hold over me. That isn't good for my internal success. It has been good for my external success in the past, but it's not good for my internal success. When it's someone I care about and I'm choosing tasks that match my strengths, and there's someone watching or who's going to feel good about it, that's when I get a task done. Pre-diagnosis, I would do a lot of tasks that weren't right for me at the absolute expense of my mental health. I said yes to everything for fear of looking like not a proper boy. So I found very, very slowly that being successful at something I disliked didn't give me any reward. It made me feel like a child and a fraud and an imposter, even afterwards, including my PhD. I don't massively feel worthy of that because I didn't like it. I did it, though, for the wrong reasons. So this was a 10-year project on my own to learn this. I didn't know what the problem was. I didn't know about ADHD, but I got lucky. I was lucky with some amazing people helping me with counseling and coaching, and I figured out that I was going to get fired again if I kept lying to myself. I needed to figure out tasks. What I do is those things, but then the big block often for me is that tiny, tiny first step of doing it. And when I'm struggling with that tiny first step, the reason why I reflect on is there's a blockage, an emotional blockage, something that I'm a bit uncomfortable. Oh, I'm not quite sure how to do that one bit. or is ambiguity. Maybe there's two ways. So what I do then is I talk about it, or I ask someone for help. Can you help me do that one bit? Who could help you with it is a question I ask myself. And usually it becomes incredibly apparent. So yeah, looking back, thinking, how did I do that? Who could help me with the first bit and get the first bit done and do it for my own internal success, not external success if it doesn't fit my strengths. That's my personal reflection, James. What about you big-haired buffoon?
I am big head at the minute, and it's also very twisted and weirdly shaped for once. Yeah,
you're like Tintin in the washing machine.
Similarly, looking back before I was diagnosed, realized that I only ever managed to do tasks through fear, really, as much as anything. I mean, my PhD, which obviously was written in crayon because I did it at the University of Wolverhampton, was just a disaster, which ended up taking nearly 5 years because of multiple issues. But one of those issues was I didn't have the motivation to get the stuff done that I needed to get done. And I've realized, particularly since I got diagnosed, and I've started to look at what tools are out there, and I've managed to be coached by a completely useless ADHD coach.
You're welcome.
I've realized that I work best with tasks and only like really effectively in two circumstances. One, if the deadline is so pressing that I'm going to get in trouble. And I know that's not healthy for my internal success, but in terms of prioritizing, if I've got, say, 6 things to do, and I know that 5 of them, I can do them next week, but one of them's got to be done tomorrow, then I can focus on the one that's got to be done tomorrow through fear of chastisement, fear of failure, fear of imposter syndrome. And that's not a healthy coping mechanism. But for me, it's when I am able to do a task. The other thing is, which is much more healthy, and we've talked about this before, is I use what I think you've coined the phrase golden hours. And for me, that's first thing in the morning. So if I'm in a good place mentally, because I've obviously got a lot going on as well as ADHD, then I tend to get up between 4 and 5 in the morning, and I am full of beans. And I'll stick my headphones in and put on the ADHD Adult UK dopamine playlist on Spotify, and I'll listen to a lot of big drums and kind of loud music, and it just gets me in the zone. And then between 4 and 5 and about 10, I'll smash the tasks that I've got to do because I'm absolutely in the zone. And then it gets to about 10, which is ironically when my medication should really be at its peak levels, that I then start to lose that ability and start to drift and start to think, I don't want to do this actually, or I just can't do this. And it's become a revelation to me that I can say to myself, well, I'm not going to do it then. And sometimes if that's something important, then I'm now much more emotionally comfortable with contacting someone and saying, I'm not going to do that thing today. Sorry, I've not been able to, but I will get it to you as soon as possible. Whereas in the past, I would either do it to the detriment of my mental health or not do it, completely avoid them, not read email for 4 days because I knew I'd not done it, and just then feel massive guilt. So using that period in the morning, which for me is just so useful because I've got loads of energy and loads of motivation, before later in the day I turn into a gibbering wreck that's reaching for every substance he can get just to try and get through an evening.
I like that idea. That's another top tip from James. Review. Can I ask about your music thing? Is that working as the buddy system for you then, the music?
It is in a way. It is in a way. And we've talked about this on Instagram and I think also on Twitter. It's interesting because it kind of polarizes people with adults with ADHD, is that people tend to either be, I absolutely can't have music on, it's a massive distraction, I can't focus, or they tend to be, I've got to have music on, it really helps me focus. And for me, I've got a number of different playlists, but particularly certain songs, if they've got kind of a heavy drum beat, if they're up tempo, if they've got an emotional, if I've got an emotional relationship with that song, then I work much better. This is looking back to our one of our previous podcasts where we talked about me impulse buying lots of speakers. This is the frustration of buying all these speakers and then having a partner who won't let me put them on because she can't deal with loud noises. So I have to use one of the 4 pairs of Bluetooth AirPods I bought because I'd forgotten I'd bought the 3 previous pairs.
I've been distracted. I've got distracted by the ADHD Adult UK podcast. Can anyone access that? And is the 1812 Overture the first track on it?
So it's not the podcast, it's the playlist, first of all. But yes, anyone can access it. It's public. We've shared it on Instagram. It's an open playlist. So you can add songs, and people, it's now got, I think, 43 people who follow it, and people have added their own songs. In fact, somebody messaged just the other day to say, I looked at this and thought, but actually it's got some bangers on it. And I think,
I mean, well, Tchaikovsky knew what he was doing, presumably.
Alex, I am not. I say it's open. I am going to delete any songs that you put on that playlist.
It's got cannons in it. He used actual live cannons as an instrument. If that is, I hate you.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, just very quickly, we've got time to play another round of what did James forget, mislay, or lose this week. Again, there's 3 options, Alex. So first, did I forget to write a birthday card which was in front of me with a pen on top of it all day, and therefore it didn't get sent on the person's birthday? Did I forget to do the washing, hence at the minute I have no working underpants? Or did I forget to buy any fags, leaving me to smoke the dodgy Malaysian cigarettes that I bought 4 years ago, which are absolutely fucking awful?
Classic. I love that working underpants is making a comeback. That's good. Cigarette thing. You live near a shop, but then you've got weird hours. The birthday card thing I really like, because I don't know if you do this, James, but I leave. If I need something to go with me the next day, I'll put it by the front door so I can't forget it. But I've often stepped over that and left the house, which is a bit like your birthday card, isn't it? So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying birthday card.
Fuck, you've got it right. That's so annoying. We actually put it in the middle of the floor in the living room with a pen on top, so one of us would remember to write it. And of course, object invisibility, it just became immediately invisible.
It's a post-it note on a computer screen, then, isn't it?
It is, and we didn't write it. Oh, shit, you've got 4 points now. It hurts me every time you get it right. So on that disastrous note, that's the end of part 2. We'll be back in part 3 to talk about some top tips and possibly even a product recommendation. See you then.
Welcome back to episode 12, part 3 of our ADHD Adult UK podcast. We're talking about getting shit done because we're very street, or task management, which is what I actually call it. All aspects of how to get those relatively short-term tasks done. We've been discussing. Now's the time for tips that we've been told by other people or that we've learned ourselves along the way, things that help us get tasks done. James, what top tip have you got for this?
It's a really good point, and it's something that I know that I am managing through using my golden hours, etc. And therefore, I don't want to use that specifically as a top tip. But what really helps me is technology. So I have a lot of different apps that will talk to each other, which then allow me to know, first of all, what tasks I've got to do and when they need to be done by. And because I do work better to a deadline, it helps me in terms of approaching those tasks. And it's normally, to be fair, my inability to do tasks is normally work-based and not home-based, he says, even though there's so much around the house that needs fixing. That's just completely invisible to me. But the stuff that can cause me anxiety, the stuff that I can worry about, is generally job related. So using the apps that I use, Evernote and Todoist, and they speak to each other. So everything I do gets written in Evernote, and then I can set up to do things that pop into Todoist, and I get an email every morning saying, these are the things you need to do today. Obviously, I don't do them, but but I might do some of them. And that means that I can get an idea of what are the tasks I need to focus on. And then if I do struggle with those tasks, the other tip, and we've mentioned it earlier, is don't give yourself shit if you can't do that task. You know, unless it's give someone the Heimlich maneuver because they're choking, because that's quite urgent. It's not life or death that you do that task right now. So if you can, it's a really big tip to just step away and do something else and not self-chastise. What about you, Alex?
I've apologised for not doing the Heimlich on you, James. I had other shit to do. It was my fault for feeding you grapes. That's a great one. I have a calendar where I put the most stupid and tiny task on it. Otherwise, it doesn't get done. The most crucial thing just goes from my working memory. Just it's gone. Did you do yeah, did you do that, Heimlich? Nope, I did not. I really like that one, James. That's good. For me, this one's easy. Learn your own strengths. In my coaching experience, and I do have some, anyone knows what they're good at and they know what they enjoy doing. And the people that think about those things, they tend to be more successful. And even more importantly, internally peaceful and successful than those who don't, A, think about what they are in the first place, and B, align their tasks to those things. Not always possible, of course, but as much as possible. If you're not sure what your strengths are, my tip, write down your weaknesses and turn them upside down. People will say, I can't work on my own in office. Yeah, then you're a good team player. Do that.
Do you mean so the writing's upside down? So
no, not literally. And James, you explicitly knew that. It was implied that I was using a metaphor. You know, I don't know.
You know, I struggle with literal and non-literal.
Metaphorical, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Turn your weaknesses upside down, not the paper. So if you don't like to focus for hours, I mean, this is an ADHD podcast, then your strength is you're able to work on multiple projects at once. Get bored easily. Tell people you're comfortable in high energy and changeable work environments and do that. That's all okay. You know, that's fine. The other tip is set it in personal reflections. Usually, in my experience, it's that first tiny blockage. So again, this is thinking. I understand this. Thinking is hard for all of us. We don't tend to like thinking. But think, what is the reason for the blockage? Is who could help me with it? What is the one thing I could do to start this? You don't have to finish it, but starting is usually some kind of emotional or logistical little blockage. That is my top tips, James.
Thank you for sharing them. Just before we go, we've got a product recommendation for the week, which is relevant for once, because normally they're not.
None of this is relevant.
Exactly. And that is to use what's known as an Eisenhower matrix or a task matrix. And this is something that Eric Hill, a colleague of mine, put me onto. And there's a copy on our website called a task matrix. And the idea is if you've got stuff to do and you're struggling to start, sometimes it helps to work out which are the most pressing tasks. And effectively, it's a grid where you rank a task based on whether it is urgent and or important, and therefore tasks which are urgent and important go in the top left box.
So it's just 4 squares, is it, James?
Yeah, it's
like
just 4 squares.
An old window.
Piece of paper with 4 squares on it, and you've got urgent and important. So if a task is urgent and important, they're the ones you probably need to focus on first. If a task is neither urgent nor important, fuck it off, because it's not for you to do right now. And that will sometimes help you, at least if you've got a list of tasks, work out the ones you need to focus on first. And like I said, there's a copy on our website, but if you Google Eisenhower Matrix, then you'll come across something.
It's £1,000 per download, isn't it, from our website?
No, unlike other ADHD accounts, we don't charge for things which are free if you Google for them.
We're in the pocket of Big Eisenhower.
We are big old Eisenhower. Okay, so thank you for listening, everybody. That was episode 12 of the ADHD Adult UK podcast, where we covered task management or getting shit done. If you'd like to get in touch with us, and we now have a WhatsApp button as well, so you can send us voice messages, which if they're relevant or if they're abusing Alex, we can read out on the podcast. If you've got any questions, if you've got anything you'd like us to cover in the future, get in touch on the socials at the usual address, ADHD Adult UK. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye all.